Everyone, Amanda here. In today's video, I'm going to cover how to set a filter in your data set based on user input. To get started today, let's first head over to the Content Manager so you can set up your collection and follow along with the code. You'll want to create a content collection called Dogs, give each dog a name, an image, and then 3 text fields for their age group, and whether or not the animal is kid-friendly. There are a number of ways you can set up this data. For the purpose of this example, we are only using text fields to filter. Go ahead and pause the video here, and then you can get your content collection set up and then follow along. Once your collection is set up, you'll want to set up a page. On this page, you'll want to drag a repeater and add an image element to it, a title, which will become the dog's name, and then some text that you can connect to the dog's age and whether or not they are good with kids. This isn't required. This is just going to be the display, so you can put whatever you want here. We won't be manually doing anything with this value. Once you have a repeater set up, go ahead and click Connect to Data. We're going to create a new data set from the dogs collection. Now, we are going to connect the image source to the image. Alt text can be the name of the dog, your dog name can connect here. Let's connect the age. And then finally, go ahead and connect kid-friendly. This is what people will see on your page load. They will see all of the dogs that you've added to your collection with their age and whether or not they are good with kids. The next thing you want to do for this example is to drag 2 checkbox groups onto your page. For the first one, you want to add a choice for good with kids and make the value yes. Notice in this example that I've capitalized the value yes. This is because that is exactly how it is in my content collection. It is important to note, if you haven't worked with data operators yet, that the majority of the API calls will expect the string to be exact. So if you wanted to use all lowercase, then your content collection should also be in all lowercase, or you should be ready to transform the data in some way. But make sure that the value of your choice matches exactly what you'll be trying to filter in the database. In age range, we're actually not going to connect directly to the numbers for the filter because I wanted to do it by groupings of whether or not we consider them young, adult, or senior. There are a few ways to do this. In my case, I've chosen to do senior, adult, and young as an age grouping in the content collection, which is separate from the numbered age. You could also filter by ranges. We're not going to cover that today. So once you have these set up, and these are manual, they're not connected to data yet, make sure you give them an ID. The first one is the pup filter group, and the second one is the age group. Now that everything is set up here for all of the drag and drop elements, we can get into the code. Although it may be counterintuitive at first, to work with the dataset filter, you need to import Wix data. Let's take a look at the API reference to see more about how setting a filter will work. In the API reference for datasets, to set a filter, you call set filter on your dataset ID and then start a Wix data filter with your regular Wix data operators. There are a couple of important notes, and we will be using and or today. So it's important to note that you will need to make sure to not call wixdata.query, even though that's the way you would do it if you're interacting directly with the Wix Data API. It's important that when you're setting a filter, you always use wixdata.filter. Back over in our code, we're going to create a couple of events. The first thing we want to do is anytime there's a change to the Good with Kids checkbox, we want an event for that. The other thing we want is that anytime one of the age range selectors is clicked on, we want another change event for that. And we want to use change because we want to, anytime there's a change, whether it's checked or unchecked. All right, let's get rid of some of these comments in here that come out of the box so we can read this a little better. So for both of these, we're going to create a new function called filter pups. This function will get called whether they're checking the Good with Kids box or one of the age range boxes. The next thing we're going to want to do is set up some empty arrays for grabbing the data. In the case of our filter pups, we're only using one checkbox, but this would allow you to add more values to that particular filter if you wanted to in the future. So we're setting up a filters array and a kids array. Then we're also getting the indices of the filter group. This is how you drill down to the value of filter groups in Velo. You would do it based on the indice and then the value. So this young checkbox is the age group indice 0. So if you wanted that value, that's the indice you would target. Since we don't know which one's going to be targeted, we are going to grab all of them. In the case of pup options, in our example, we only have one, so we actually do know all the time what that indice would be. But for the sake of this, we're going to assume that you might be building out the filters, so we want to get them all. So on change, we're going to trigger this function. Then the next thing we're going to want to do is make sure that we're only really firing these functions to filter the data if there's anything in there. So if nothing comes back in selected indices, then that means all of these are empty, which is the same way they are on load. If there's something in these, we're going to build out some logic there. But if they are set to empty, you want to be able to just clear the filter at that point. So the way that you clear a filter with a data set is to then just pass wixdata.filter empty. This will reset the data so that it's exactly like it would be on page load. Assuming that we have some values that have been checked, the first thing we're going to do is sort through these age options because we know there'll be multiple and push them into a filter array, push each value into the filter array. So this is getting the value for each of those indices and pushing it into array. So for age group options, you've got the indice and that's the value. This will give us an array of the choices that we will then use in the data filter. For this example, we know that pup options will only ever be good with kids. So we're not going to do another for loop for that. There's no need to do that yet. We're just going to check and see if it's there. And then we're going to set kids equal to value. Notice I did not use the indice here. This is because you can use value to get the values of the checkbox group. However, they will return in an array. In our case, our array only has one. You could get all of the values for the age group as well, but you would have to remember that you are still going to have to sort through an array and that they will be in order by the indice. So it does make more sense to target the indice in that case. In this case, we can just call value. It's more simple and it'll return us that yes checked option. The next thing I want to do is evaluate whether or not the user has interacted with the Good with Kids checkbox and the age group checkbox. This is because there's going to be a difference between an and or an or filter we're calling. So let's get to the code for that and I'll explain what's going on. So the first thing I'm checking after we've grabbed and pushed into the arrays, I'm checking if that array is greater than 0 and the filter's array length is greater than 0. If both of these have data in them, I want to return dogs of a particular age that are also child friendly. So you must use the AND operator here so that both sides have to be true. So you'll notice that we've got the data set filter. Then you call wixdata.filter. We're going to say has sum of the age, and wixdata.filter has sum of the kids. Again, we know there's only one value. I'm calling has sum because this is an array and you could add more filters in there if you wanted to. Make sure to target the ID of the column in your content collection. If this filter fails for you, the most common reason for that is that perhaps your ID isn't what you made it to begin with. So if we know that there's kids and ages, then we want to make sure that the filter is and. Else, we're going to assume it's one or the other, and then it can be an or, because it can be that they are kid-friendly or have particular ages, and we don't care what it's going to bring back. With that one, it can evaluate them separately. So in this case, we know that it has one or the other. It's going to filter by the ages or filter by whether or not the dog is kid-friendly. Let's take a look and publish this and see what it looks like on the front end. On load, you'll see the checkboxes are unchecked. All of the dogs available are here. If we click young dogs, we get back the 3 that meet our criteria for what a young dog is. Notice that Waffles is not good with kids. So when you click good with kids, Waffle disappears and now we only have the young dogs that are good with kids. So let's go over what we covered today. We went over how to set up some checkbox groups that can be used as a filter for a data set connected to a repeater. It's pretty simple to start with and can get more complicated depending on how many filters you have. You don't have to use just checkboxes. You could use drop-downs, selection tags, anything that really makes sense. Think about how your data is structured and which filters have to affect each other so you can decide how many groups of checkboxes that you need, or if something else would make a little more sense.